I stood alone by my mother-in-law's hospital bed as the monitor flatlined at 3:42 p.m. The sound wasn't like the dramatic beeps you hear in movies, but a low, continuous hum that seemed to stretch into eternity. My hands were still wrapped around Holly's cooling fingers, and for a moment I couldn't move. My throat closed, my chest felt heavy, and the only thing louder than the silence was the realization that I was the only living person in the room. Other families filled the hallway beyond the door, children clutching balloons, husbands holding wives, doctors embraced by grateful relatives. Laughter, relief, and chatter drifted from every corner. But in this room, there was nothing. No husband, no sister-in-law, no friend, no phone call. Just me. Just Holly, whose chest had risen and fallen for the very last time. "Mrs. Walsh, are you all right?" A nurse appeared in the doorway clutching a clipboard to her chest. Her voice carried that practiced gentleness of someone who had seen death too often but still hadn't gone numb to it. I nodded, though my throat burned with words I couldn't force out. 3 days I had kept vigil here. 3 days of phone calls, unanswered voicemails, ignored texts left unread. I called them again, I whispered at last. My husband, his sister. They said they were coming. The nurse gave me a look of understanding. She had seen me trying, had seen the empty doorway every time my head jerked up at the sound of footsteps. "Some people struggle with goodbyes," she said kindly. But we both knew the truth. This wasn't about struggling. This was about choosing not to be present. She pressed something into my hand, then something that made my heart lurch, a sealed envelope. "She asked me to give you this, only after she was gone." It was Holly's sharp, elegant handwriting covered the front. Courtney. My name, not daughter-in-law, not Mrs. Walsh, just me. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside, a single rusted key was taped to the top of the page. Beneath it, an address I didn't recognize, and one chilling sentence: "They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten." The paper burned hot in my palm. I folded it quickly when the nurse asked if I was okay, muttering something about final thoughts, but inside me a storm had begun. By the time I left the hospital, the sun outside felt wrong, too bright, too ordinary. Families bustled through the parking lot carrying flowers, babies, laughter. Meanwhile, my world had shifted into something raw and unsteady. I sat in my car for 20 minutes staring at nothing before I could even turn the key. Travis finally called that evening. My phone lit up with his name, and for 1 second my chest flooded with relief. Then I answered, and his voice was casual, almost distracted. "Hey babe, you coming home soon? Did you grab groceries? We're out of pretty much everything." I had to grip the counter to keep my voice steady. "Holly died today." The silence on his end lasted far too long. "Oh," he said finally. "When did that happen?" "D42. I replied, though tears were now streaming down my face. "You'd have known if you'd answered any of my calls." Another pause, then a flat response. "Look, I had meetings all day. You know how it is. No apology, no grief, just excuses." I hung up, and the house felt emptier than it ever had before. On the kitchen table sat the ordinary clutter of bills and magazines, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Holly's notes seared against my skin, as though her voice was whispering directly to me from beyond the grave. "They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten." That night I barely slept. Travis came home late, slid into bed without a word, and was gone again before dawn. I lay awake clutching the key until it dug into my palm. At sunrise I made my decision. I would follow Holly's map. The address led me 30 miles outside of town, down winding roads that narrowed into gravel paths, nearly consumed by weeds. An iron gate stood rusted, hanging ajar as though waiting for me. Beyond it sat a weathered cottage, its white paint long since faded to gray, wild roses clawing at the windows like they were trying to escape. The key slid into the tarnished lock, as if it had been waiting decades just for this moment. The door creaked open, and the smell of lavender and old paper wrapped around me. Dust danced in beams of light breaking through cracked curtains. Shelves lined with books, albums stacked on tables. And on the kitchen counter another envelope. This one read, "To be opened upon my death by my lawyer." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. And it was as if I'd entered Holly's true world. A life her children never knew, a secret place she had chosen to share only with me. And as I stood in that forgotten cottage, Holly's words echoed again. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten. The cottage was silent except for the groan of old wood under my steps. I felt like an intruder and yet at the same time like I had been invited into a sacred place. Dust lay thick on the shelves, but the air carried traces of lavender, the same scent Holly always wore, clinging faintly to scarves she kept folded in her dresser at home. It was as if her presence lingered here, waiting for me to cross the threshold. I wandered room to room, my heart pounding. In the sitting room I found photographs tucked into frames turned backward. A younger Holly with a child on her hip, another tugging at her hand. The faces were my husband and his sister, smiling, laughing. But behind them Holly's eyes carried shadows, exhaustion, loneliness, a hint of grief she had never spoken aloud. It struck me hard. How many years had she suffered in silence, even while surrounded by her own family? On a desk by the window lay letters bound in twine, dozens of them. I picked one at random, but before I could open it my phone buzzed. "Travis, where are you?" His voice was sharp, impatient. I stared out the dusty window at the wild roses. "I'm somewhere you should have been." "What does that mean?" "Holly left me something," I whispered. He exhaled loudly like I was inconveniencing him. "Whatever it is, just give it to the lawyer. Don't go poking around." His words cut deeper than he knew. I hung up before he could say more, my hands shaking. Because Holly hadn't trusted her children, she had trusted me. And now with every creak of the cottage floor I felt the weight of that trust pressing harder. The following week I sat in the lawyer's office, the envelope from the cottage laid carefully on his desk. He slid it open with a practiced motion, eyes scanning the contents before flicking up to mine. "It appears Holly left a separate will," he said quietly. I froze. "Separate?" "Yes. This cottage and everything inside it she has left solely to you. Along with..." He shuffled the papers. "A considerable account in your name. She was meticulous. Every detail is here." My ears rang. "But why me? She has children." The lawyer gave me a long, measured look. "Sometimes blood is not loyalty. She made her choice." By the time I left, my hands were trembling around the documents. I could already imagine Travis's reaction if he discovered this. Or his sister's. Their absence at Holly's bedside had not been forgetfulness. It had been abandonment. And now they would face the consequences of her final decision. That evening I set the papers on the dining table. Travis noticed them instantly, his expression darkening. "What's that?" "Holly's will," I said simply. He snatched the pages, scanning them. His face paled, then flushed scarlet. This has to be a mistake. She wouldn't leave you everything. She barely knew you." I steadied my voice, though my heart pounded. "She knew me better than she knew either of you. She knew who stayed, who cared, who held her hand when she died." His fist clenched around the papers. For a moment I thought he might tear them. Instead, he dropped them on the table and stalked out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shuddered. I sank into a chair, my body shaking. I hadn't meant for this. I hadn't asked for it. Yet somehow Holly had chosen me as the keeper of her legacy, and in doing so she had unleashed a storm I wasn't sure I could withstand. Days blurred. Travis grew colder. His sister livid. Calls from relatives poured in, their voices sharp with accusation. "How dare you take what isn't yours? How could you steal from family?" But through it all, Holly's words echoed in my mind like a drumbeat. "They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten." One night, unable to sleep, I drove back to the cottage. I lit a single lamp, sat at the desk, and untied the bundle of letters. The first one began with words that took my breath away. "To the woman who will find these, I know you must be someone who cared when others did not." I pressed my hand to my mouth as tears slid down my cheeks. Holly had written them, not for her children, not for Travis, but for me. And in each line she poured out truths she had kept buried for decades. Secrets that would unravel everything I thought I knew about this family. The letters became my obsession. Every night after Travis fell asleep, or more often didn't come home at all, I returned to the cottage with a thermos of coffee and trembling hands. The house had become a sanctuary, a place where Holly's voice lived on through the ink of her pen. The first bundle contained confessions. She wrote of the loneliness that gnawed at her, even while she lived in a grand house filled with fine furniture and expensive wine. She wrote of how Nathan, her husband Travis's father, had belittled her for years, calling her weak, ungrateful, dramatic. When she turned to her children for comfort, she found none. They mirrored their father's dismissive tone, rolling their eyes when she asked for company, retreating to their own lives while she drowned in silence. But the second bundle was darker. Inside those pages, Holly named names. Business partners who had cheated her husband. Friends who had abandoned her after she refused to host another gala. Affairs she suspected but never dared to prove. She poured everything she couldn't say out loud into those pages. And then came the third bundle. My breath caught as I read the first line, Courtney. If you are the one holding this letter, then I know you are the only one who truly saw me. I set the page down, tears welling. No one had ever written to me like that. Not my husband. Not even my own mother, who had died when I was still young. Holly's words reached into the emptiest parts of me, the parts that had longed for acknowledgement, for belonging. She continued. I have left you not just the cottage but the journals hidden within the attic floorboards. They tell the story no one ever wanted told. Use them wisely. My children will despise you for having them, but remember, truth has a way of surviving even when people try to bury it. I nearly dropped the letter. Journals hidden in the attic. At dawn I dragged a chair beneath the slanted ceiling and felt along the wooden boards. My fingers found a loose plank, and beneath it a stack of worn leather journals bound with ribbon. The pages smelled of dust and lavender. My hands shook as I opened the first one. It began in the 1980s when Holly was only 25. Her entries painted a vivid picture of a young woman who had dreamed of love, but found herself shackled in a cold, loveless marriage. She detailed nights she cried in the garden, so her children wouldn't hear mornings when she painted on a smile before breakfast. And buried in those journals was a revelation that made my pulse stop. Travis and his sister weren't Nathan's children at all. Holly had written of an affair, a brief but passionate love with a man named Daniel, a musician she had met in secret. She had buried the truth out of fear, raising the children under Nathan's name, letting the lie calcify into family history. My vision blurred as I read. If this was true, then everything, the inheritance battles, the accusations, the bitterness, rested on a foundation of lies. That evening, Travis confronted me in the kitchen. His face was tight, eyes burning. You've been going to that cottage, haven't you? My sister saw your car. What are you doing there? I stared at him, my throat dry. For a fleeting moment I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to hand him the journals and say, this is why she left me the key. This is why she chose me. But then I remembered Holly's words. They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten. So I said nothing. I only murmured, she trusted me, Travis, that's all you need to know. His hand slammed the counter, making the dishes rattle. She was my mother, not yours. I flinched, but I didn't back down. Then why weren't you there when she died? The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. He turned and stormed out, leaving the door open behind him. I stood alone in the kitchen, chest heaving, Holly's journals clutched to my heart. Later that night, I sat by the cottage window as rain streaked the glass, reading Holly's words aloud to the empty room. They wanted my silence, but silence is not love. Silence is abandonment. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Holly hadn't just left me her possessions. She had left me her voice. And now it was up to me to decide what to do with it. The storm that had been building finally broke on the night of the memorial dinner. Travis's sister Melissa insisted on hosting it at the family home, a sprawling estate that felt cavernous without Holly's presence. I walked through the front doors with the journals hidden in my bag, my chest tight with the weight of what I carried. Relatives filled the living room, sipping wine, speaking in hushed tones. The air was thick with performance grief, played like a role on a stage. People dabbing at dry eyes, others sighing dramatically about how much Holly had meant to them, though many hadn't visited her in years. Melissa greeted me with a strained smile. Courtney, you came. I was her daughter-in-law, I said softly. Of course I came. The room quieted as she raised her glass. To our mother. To her grace, her dignity, her legacy. I felt my pulse hammering. Grace, dignity, legacy. They were words Holly had begged for in life and been denied, and here they were now thrown like confetti in a room full of people who had let her die alone. Before I could stop myself, I spoke. Do you even know what her legacy was? All eyes turned to me. Travis stiffened at my side, his hand brushing mine in warning, but the words kept tumbling. She wrote it down, every night, every year, and she left it for me to read when she was gone. Melissa's smile faltered. What are you talking about? I reached into my bag, my fingers brushing the worn leather covers. The journals felt alive, pulsing with truth. Your mother left me these. She wanted me to know what she endured, what she hid. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone muttered. She left them to you. Travis hissed in my ear. Courtney, not now. But it was too late. The dam had broken. She wrote about the loneliness, I said, my voice shaking. How she begged for company and got silence. How she begged for love and got indifference. She wrote about all of you, how you let her fade away. Melissa's face went white then red. You're lying. I opened one of the journals, my hands trembling, and read aloud, they never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten. The words dropped like stones into the silence. Melissa's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. You forged that. You're trying to steal from us. I shook my head. I don't need to steal. She gave me the key. She chose me. Travis grabbed my arm, his voice low and furious. Enough, Courtney. But my tears had already begun to fall. She died holding my hand. Not yours. Not Melissa's. Mine. And she knew who loved her in the end. The room erupted, relatives arguing, accusing voices rising like a storm. Melissa lunged toward me, but Travis stepped between us, his face pale. For a fleeting second I thought he might defend me. But instead he whispered, "Give me the journals. They don't belong to you." I looked at him through my tears, and for the first time I saw him clearly. The boy who had never grown into the man his mother needed. The husband who had never once asked why I cried myself to sleep. The son who had abandoned his mother in her final hours. No, I said quietly, they belong to the truth. And with that, I clutched the journals to my chest and walked out into the rain, leaving the chaos behind me. I drove straight to the cottage, headlights cutting through sheets of water. Inside, I lit every lamp until the house glowed like a beacon. I laid the journals out across the table one by one, their spines cracked, their pages waiting. Holly's voice filled the room through her words, and I whispered to her ghost, "I won't let them erase you. I'll carry your story. I'll make them remember them." Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the cottage, and I felt it deep inside. The climax wasn't the fight at that dinner. The climax was this moment, me choosing once and for all to stand with Holly, even if it meant standing against my own husband. In the days after the memorial dinner, the phones never stopped ringing. Melissa left furious voicemails, her voice cracking with rage. "You think you can turn her against us even after she's dead? You think your family? You'll regret this, Courtney." Relatives echoed her bitterness, accusing me of poisoning Holly's memory. But at the cottage, surrounded by Holly's journals, I found a strange sense of calm. For the first time since her death, I felt less alone. Each night I read her words aloud as if she could hear me. Her loneliness, her regrets, her flickers of hope. It was painful, yes, but it was also a strange kind of healing. Travis grew more distant. He stayed out late, sometimes not coming home at all. When he was there, his eyes lingered on the journals with something between resentment and fear. One night he finally said it. "You've changed, Courtney. You care more about her than about me." I looked at him steadily, my chest aching. "When she needed you most, you weren't there. Do you know what she said the moment before she died? Nothing. Because she was already too weak. And the only hand she held was mine." His jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with something like shame. But he didn't apologize. He only muttered, "You'll regret this obsession," and left the room. A week later, an attorney contacted me again. Holly's estate was being finalized, and despite the uproar, her instructions were airtight. The cottage, the journals, the account, all legally mine. The family could fight, but they would lose. Holly had made certain of it. When Melissa learned the truth, she sent a single text. "She was our mother, not yours. You'll never be one of us." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "You're right. I'll never be one of you. And thank God for that." That night I sat at the cottage window as dawn began to break, painting the sky with soft gold. I opened Holly's final journal, the one she had written in her last months. Her handwriting was shaky but still elegant. To the one who finds this, I don't want revenge. I only want truth. If you read this, then you were the only one who stayed, the only one who saw me as I was, not as they pretended me to be. Please don't let them rewrite me. Don't let my story vanish. Remember me. That's all I ask. Tears blurred my vision. She hadn't wanted vengeance, she had wanted remembrance. And in that moment, I understood my purpose. I wouldn't use the journals as weapons. I would use them as testimony. I would preserve her voice, not to punish her children but to ensure she was never erased again. Weeks turned into months. Travis eventually packed a bag and left. He didn't slam doors or curse. He simply walked out, leaving his wedding ring on the counter like a silent surrender. I watched him go with a strange sense of relief. The man who couldn't love me, who couldn't even love his mother, no longer had power over me. Melissa stopped calling. The relatives fell silent. The cottage remained mine, a quiet refuge where I could breathe. One evening, as I organized Holly's letters into archival boxes, I noticed something tucked into the final pages, a small Polaroid photo. It showed Holly younger, standing in a sunlit garden, smiling a smile that was unguarded, unbroken. On the back she had written 3 words: I was here. I pressed the photo to my chest and whispered back, "You still are." And maybe, just maybe, that was the lesson buried in all of this. That love is not proved by grand speeches or perfect families, but by showing up. By staying when it's hard. By holding a hand when it trembles in the dark. So here I am, sharing her story with you. Raw, messy, and painfully real. If you've ever felt unseen, unloved, or forgotten, know this: your presence matters more than you realize. Sometimes the smallest act of staying can change someone's entire world. If Holly's story and mine touched you, I hope you'll like this video. Share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more stories of truth and resilience, and leave a comment with your own reflections. Together we can keep voices like hers alive.